Thank you all for joining us. I've got a fun couple of stories to tell you before we get into the content. I hope all of your travel here was a bit easier than some of the other speakers. We had somebody who had engine troubles on the plane and is not going to make it, and the other guy's going to be about 2 minutes late. So we're going to slow roll the start here for you guys. I'm sorry about that. We're running to find subs, but I'm Ryan Henrik. I work with Observian, a partner in the MSSP space, and
Yeah, and I'm Jeremy Fertney. I'm a principal cloud architect for AWS solutions at Fortinet.
awesome.
There it goes. All right, so we wanted to kind of start today talking about the state of digital application or digital acceleration and the adoption of applications and how they're moving to cloud. With these slides here, we kind of highlight what we're seeing across the enterprise, and how COVID has impacted that acceleration, right? People are rapidly moving to the cloud. I think everybody here knows that, is probably here because of that, right? And so we wanted to talk kind of about how and why people are moving to the cloud. And at the end of the day, really, it's all about the application, right? We don't want to concern ourselves with the underlying infrastructure, with the nuts and bolts, the power, the cooling, all of that. What is driving this adoption is, in fact, the applications themselves and the value that those applications are bringing to your workforce.
And, if we just kind of try and boil it down, why did we all move to the cloud, right? It was for speed of development, speed of deployment, the ability to be able to make changes at scale via API, right? Program everything. We're not living in vSphere anymore, trying to make changes to our to our physical infrastructure. And so what we have seen is that as people accelerate in the cloud, they are picking the clouds for what services they offer the best. And so this is everybody is kind of we're all here at reInvent, right? We believe in this thing. We're doing this. So everybody is moving to the cloud, and the question is, what ends up there? How does it end up there? What does it look like? And that's really kind of what we're focusing on.
And so obviously a huge concern for a lot of us here is securing those applications and securing that whole journey and process as we move to the cloud. Things don't, lift and shift is one strategy here all the time, but in reality, it tends to be a graduated, a journey, right? Pieces and parts get moved at different times, and so you have your applications spread across, multiple different areas and locations. And that's where a lot of the talk about, hybrid cloud or multi-cloud falls into play, right? And with that, there's a lot of different responsibilities there, and areas of expertise tends to vary, right? You have a cloud security expert. They might not necessarily have the skills and knowledge to fully encompass the security posture of an application while it's in the process of migrating, right? So where those products end up and where they're going, right, you end up with a situation where you have different silos of security expert, and the focus of those experts sometimes doesn't overlap with where the applications are actually residing.
Yeah. At its core, we want to focus on building a secure application and shipping that. And, we don't want to focus on where it's going to land and how it's going to land there, right? We really want to focus on what we're building. That's what we're good at. That's why we're building that. And, we want to be able to, secure that workload wherever it ends up, whether it ends up, in an on-premise data center that we still manage, or it ends up in our AWS cloud deployment, right? We want to be able to make sure that we can, monitor that we can, that we have visibility into it, that we understand the challenges associated with it. And, what I think is really hard is, finding players that can understand, the AWS security specific concerns, the GCP security specific concerns. In an individual, you can find each of those, but can you find somebody that knows, all 3 clouds or all 4 clouds like the back of their hand, and can still manage an on-premise firewall, in your data center?
And so, looking a little closer at these security trends that we see, overwhelming majority use 2 or more cloud providers, right? 76% there. This multi-cloud hybrid deployments, I think is here to stay, and having that security expertise that Ryan alluded to, becomes critical. And so, one way you can do that is with these overlay security posture applications that can integrate with your native tools across all of your footprints and provide you that visibility and control in an actionable way for those security personnel.
Yeah, I mean, really, what we're focusing on here is, if you're going to deploy, into the cloud, what we're seeing more and more is that we're ending up in more than one cloud, and we really need tooling that can work with all of our clouds and work with our on-premise data center if that's still the case, and we need to be able to speak a common language. We need to be able to see that these storage buckets are insecure in a way that we understand, and really focus on having visibility into all of our deployments in a single place.
And so when we talk to those applications, right, FortiCNP, or Cloud Native Protection, is the Fortinet specific product that actually offers this broad reach across multiple clouds, across all of your native controls that are already in AWS, that you're already running, and has all those hooks and visibility. What we see with the security staff in those environments is these challenges here that we have broke out, right? A lack of visibility, a lack of control, a lack of expertise, which goes back to what we were speaking to before, and then of course the expense, right? Everything comes down to expense at the end of the day, and so what we've done with FortiCNP is we've integrated with the AWS native tools, so that that helps drive costs down. You're not duplicating a bunch of data for the security staff. You're using what's already there and already present in AWS. And with the ability to cover hybrid cloud, multi-cloud deployments, we can help bridge that gap in staffing expertise.
Yeah, look, this is what we've seen across our customer base is that, as they move into the cloud, or maybe as they jump kind of feet first into the cloud, in a single cloud, it's easy enough to kind of get the data that you need to make decisions. But when you can't hire a team that has expertise in AWS and in GCP maybe, and in your on-prem environment, you really need a single suite of tools. And so we've been working with customers who are looking for, I hate to use the phrase like single pane of glass, but they're really looking for a place that they can go and understand their posture across all of the applications that they have deployed, and really understand kind of where they sit from a security vulnerability perspective, so that they can make better choices and that they aren't kind of bogged down in the day-to-day verbiage of how do we manage this AWS deployment versus this GCP deployment, right? We want to deploy everything as code, and then we want to have insight and visibility into it so that we understand what we've done incorrectly, how we can fix that, and how we can make sure that we're deploying a secure application stack.
So when we look at securing applications that are in process to migrating to cloud, we want to look at critical success factors, define what would be a successful migration, right? And so we've brought out a couple different pieces here that Fortinet is available to help you with, right? As mentioned before, with FortiCNP, you get this mesh platform of consistent security posture, consistent analyzation of what is going on in your environments. And that leads to rapid responses from your NOC and SOC teams that are going in there and actually operating the tool, right? This overall simplifies your operations and speeds things up, provides faster responses, and a more secure posture overall. I've been talking about FortiCNP mostly today, but Fortinet has a broad security suite of tools that will help you secure any workloads that you have in AWS, and there's multiple different attack vectors that we can help you mitigate with that portfolio. We also have deep integrations with AWS, right? We've been working with AWS for about 8 years now, building and better integrating our products every day, right? From integrating with Security Hub and Guard Duty to tying into the latest gateway load balancers and network stacks that allow for consistent inspection across your AWS environment. We also, strive for the flexible consumption models that people like in AWS, right? That's a big factor to going into AWS, and that's something we want to help support, right? Whether that's a consumption-based model where you're being charged, paying per gigabyte, per connection per second, or total object sizes, or hourly on-demand consumption, as well as annual or third-party channel procurement options. That's all available. And then the last thing we want to mention is we do actually have a cloud consulting services group within Fortinet. This is a vendor-agnostic group. This isn't your typical professional services, which we do offer as well, but the cloud consulting services goes in to help you with your cloud issues, your cloud problems, and help you address your strategy heading in and migrating into the cloud.
Yeah, look, one of my customer story from kind of a previous life, one that we've heard kind of over and over again, and that I've helped some customers with more recently is it was an ad tech company that ran feet first into the cloud, rebuilt their entire application. They abandoned the data center, and found it. They did it for the burst capabilities, right? Their ability to go and deliver more when necessary, and they found that they had previously a steady state for most of the year, and then they had bursting for the holidays and some other seasonal ad tech needs, and the consumption cost of being fully in the cloud for them was too much. And they really wanted to leverage the cloud for just the burst capabilities, and so they moved back into the data center. They rebuilt their application on top of Kubernetes, and they ran the base workload in the data center, and then they bursted it into EKS. And so at the time, I was working for a cloud native security vendor, and we wanted to help them secure that, right? We wanted to sell them a solution to kind of go and do that, and we could not help them with the on-prem section of their Kubernetes deployment, even though it was just Kubernetes. We could help them with EKS, but we couldn't do that. And so, at the end of the day, they didn't end up working with us because they needed something that could work in their on-premise environment and give them unified visibility into their cloud environment, where they were bursting and where they were kind of producing the vast majority of their workload. So that's kind of a story that stuck with me. It's something that why I ended up in the consulting space was I wanted to be able to kind of work with multiple products to solve a specific customer need rather than fit a square peg into a round hole and say like, hey, this cloud-only security product is what you need for this hybrid cloud deployment. And so Fortinet has been a great partner here for us in kind of those environments where there are multi-clouds in play, where there's on-premise workloads still in play. They have the connections into the into the cloud, into your on-premise deployment. They have the ability to kind of pull all the data that's needed to give you a unified visibility and give you a single pane to work through problems in. Which I think if we boil down security at the end of the day, it's about doing the basics at scale. The complicated stuff is not the problem. It's the basics. If you can do all the basics at scale, you'll be in a better position than any of your neighbors. And doing the basics starts with being able to see what's wrong and understand what's wrong. And that's something that a cloud agnostic, a workload agnostic tool is really good for.
All right. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Have a great reInvent.